If I'm not looking at the camera, I'm just not even gonna fix it. It's not this kind of video. Hey everybody, this is gonna be a little bit of a different video today. I just wanted to take you through the game room that I have that's sort of my office workspace slash game era collection. I just thought today we'd do something a little different, and I'm just gonna ramble. We're going completely off script, no notes, just completely gonna walk around and just ramble about stuff and throw in B-roll where I need it. This is the entire scope of my office slash room. So it starts with basically one wall to another. There's my recording, and that's pretty much it. As you can see behind me, there's not much, but there's a closet full of stuff in there, and then everything else just kind of end up on shelves here. Shout out to IKEA Billy bookshelves. That's just sort of where things go. I think the idea with this video is that you yourself could watch this and see how I do things with my game collection. I do have quite a bit of stuff, not as much as some people do, but I like to be a little tailored in the way I do things, and I just want to explain like sort of my thought process behind game collecting, especially in modern day, and we can go through it. So before I do a bit of a tour here, I wanted to sort of go over what my idea with this game room is, really. So basically, when I first moved in here, I decided that this small bedroom would be converted into what I would have as a game room slash office. I painted the walls when I first moved in, and then slowly I've accumulated a lot of furniture to sort of get the room going exactly how I want it to be. Usually when you do this stuff, you have to sort of feel it out. Like, you never really know exactly what's going to be best for you at the time. And over the years, we've been here for about 2 or 3 years, and we've mostly figured it out. But yeah, it's generally a pretty small space, so being able to walk through it very quickly and easily is a very big priority. But honestly, the number one thing has been just appreciating sitting on the couch, playing some games, and having something that really facilitates me being able to do that easily. As things get busier and busier as the years go on, it's been nice to have a place where I can keep all these things that I really appreciate and have them accessible and easy to get to whenever I need to. For a long time, this is just something that I wanted to have, a place to put all these things that I'd accumulated again, and to have it sorted out in a way that works for me the best way I can imagine. Generally speaking, my collection is pretty much just a library. I'm not a huge figure collector, though I do have a decent amount of figures just gifted to me mostly. A lot of plushes, like you can see up there, those are mostly gifts or things that I just picked up along the way. Not that I have anything against that, but generally speaking, the way that I operate in terms of game collecting is not so much on the merch, not so much on the collector's editions, and mostly just on things that build up an actual library. A lot of spines. I like just seeing a bookshelf full of spines, and you'll see that a lot throughout this. If you've watched a lot of my videos, this is the main corner of the room that I use for pretty much all of my recording, because it's pretty much directly across from my desk, which lets my microphone connect to it properly and easily. I don't have a portable or wireless microphone, and for whatever reason, when I plug this thing in directly to my phone, it sounds awful, so I usually just keep to recording in this spot here. So generally, the layout of here is pretty simple. I've got a few bookshelves setting up most of my game collection, and then I keep most of my consoles and stuff in the storage closet here. If you see back here, I've got my TV and everything set up, and I have that little cart over there that I used for consoles that I need less often. Down on the bottom, I keep most of my day-to-day consoles, things like the GameCube, the Analog 3D, which I've been using a lot, and my PS3 Slim usually go there. And my Switch 2, which is probably the console I use the most at the moment. I wanted to have a setup that would let me connect a larger TV to my PC to help me record so that I could, sit on the couch or something. And it ended up being that I obviously had to keep my TV near my PC, so it ended up right here behind me. I've also got this big movie poster sized Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. You're going to see a lot of Godzilla stuff around because I'm a big fan of that too. It doesn't come up as much in YouTube videos, but music and movies are also a big thing for me, so there's a little bit of that scattered around too. But the general idea here was that I wanted things to be as functional as I could have it without being too cluttered. I don't really like having a mess of things around, and I try to keep things pretty organized in here as best as I can. So anything that's not getting used ends up in that closet over there, and everything that I am using gets put on the TV stand or on that cart. That cart is super useful, by the way. I've gotten tons of use out of it for storing cables that I use day to day, or just, tools like measuring tapes. You never know what you need. And of course, the consoles that I use when I record. Generally speaking, I'm not using a Sega Saturn 24/7, so the Sega Saturn goes there. And everything plugs into the desk. So this is where everything happens. This is my little corner desk set up here. It's very bare bones. I just have this big old monitor that I got from a long story. Maybe another time I'll share that. But got my boom arm that I use for recording voiceover if I need to. I've got this desk mat that I'm pretty proud of that I designed with the Camobot graphics and had printed online. There's tons of these companies that you can just do that with. I used to use an ancient keyboard for dozens of years, and this is an 8-bit DOE version that looks kind of like it. So I always got that. I kept that retro sort of vibe of my keyboard, even though I use like modern gaming mice and stuff like that. I think right now I'm using a Razer mouse. But I do all my editing here, and it's a pretty simple aspect of the room. I have an old table that I just used a bit of a vinyl to change the brown into a black sort of wood color to match everything else in the room, to match the chair, to match everything else. You'll see some of the old photos, maybe I'll have pictures of it. It was super torn up when I first got it because I've had this old table forever, and I never decided to replace it because it's just very good for what it does. It's super simple. This is probably the most boring aspect of the collection because this isn't really part of the collection. This is just where I do the video editing. I do have a long history with PC gaming, and so I do end up doing a lot of my gaming here, especially when it comes to online stuff, competitive stuff. I prefer to play on PC. I still play a ton of Overwatch these days, and other than editing videos, this is what I'm doing here. But let's go take a look at my PS3 collection, which is one of the biggest collections that I have, even though it's not the most valuable or special, just because PlayStation 3 games are so cheap nowadays, and I have a lot of nostalgia for that. And so I spent a lot of time in the last few years especially just picking up stuff that I thought was cool or interesting, or stuff that I missed for PS3. I have one of each model of PS3, but I mostly use a Super Slim for recording and daily use. Funny thing about the PS3 is that you need an HDMI splitter to record because of a production that it has, so I had to get one of those for recording the console. In terms of highlights for the PS3, I have 3D Dot Game Heroes, which is an awesome Atlas published game. I don't know if Atlas developed it actually, but it's like a Zelda clone that I've been meaning to take a look at. Super cool, really great game. Something about PS3 that unfortunately, having a YouTube channel, I've begun to realize is that people aren't quite as interested in this thing as I am. A lot of PS3 games just don't really have the same, draw as the other consoles do, especially Nintendo and Sega consoles. But I really dig the PS3. There's a lot of cool stuff, and it's all really cheap to collect for, which is really cool. Speaking of not cheap games, I do have a copy of Drakengard 3, which has really grown in price over the years. I bought this on Amazon for like $25 or something like that, and it's gone up to over $100, which is a lot for PS3 games. All these prices are going to be in Canadian, by the way, so you can convert that if you want. Another thing with the PS3 is it has one of the very few collector's editions that I ever bought. Back in the day, I was a big fan of Little Big Planet, and I bought this collector's edition. This is all I have left of it, the two things and the Sackboy, but I have a lot of nostalgia for those games, and maybe I'll cover them sometime too. For me, the cool thing about PS3 is that there's a lot of cheap, good stuff, especially HD collections. Like you've got the Eco collection, you've got Jak and Daxter collection, Killzone collection, which I've actually covered in a video. Yeah, lots of great collections that are super cheap that you can make, that you can get for maybe $50. This is also the home of another great game, Puppeteer, which I covered in another video. This game is a really great platformer that, I think doesn't get as much respect as it deserves. I didn't like it as much as I wanted to, but it was still really good. Also, another thing with PS3 is that it is not region locked, so I actually have a good amount of Japanese games for PS3. So you can get some really cheap, good stuff for PS3 if you just want to collect the physical copy of it just for the sake of it. Like I picked up The Last Guy in Japan when I was there a few years ago, and you can also get Okami HD, which plays entirely in English. But that's pretty much it for my PS3 collection. It's pretty big. I have over 150 games, but maybe someday I'll go through them a bit more carefully. Way down here, I've got my PS4 Japanese stuff and PS1 games. I don't have very much for PS4 and PS1. Not really for any particular reason, but just because I don't really bother collecting for them as much, especially PS4. PS4 is kind of where I fell off of what Sony was up to. I was only really with Sony for one generation, PS3, but there are some great things on here that I really like Legend of Dragoon, awesome RPG. Of course, Final Fantasy VII, and Ridge Racer Type 4, which I did a video about a long time ago. As for PS4, I have not too much stuff, but it's mostly just here, seriously, for Rock Band. Yeah. So down here you can see I've got my PS2 and Wii collection down here, and they're a lot smaller than my giant PS3 shelf, but there's stuff that I've been slowly working on. I've also got my Xbox stuff here, not a ton of it either. Most of the stuff that I collect for on PS2 and the Wii is really just for videos that I want to do or stuff that I think is interesting. I always went out of my way to get the console versions of Valve games because those are just the only real way to get those on a physical copy. And I've also got RPGs that I like Tales of the Abyss and stuff like that. So yeah, you can see I've got a few things that I've, been picking up along the way. I've got Fire Emblem here. Oh my god, I can't even get things out of this thing sometimes. Another thing to think about for your own game collection, get shelves that actually fit things properly, because sometimes I've stuffed these things and I can't even get Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn out. But I've got a few RPGs and stuff like that I've been meaning to try out, like Rogue Galaxy. I always thought looked cool to me, and Tales of Legendia, which I haven't played yet myself, but I've been meaning to, and Tales of the Abyss, which I have played on 3DS, and this is an awesome game. I really like that one. I'm pretty late to Xbox, but I did end up getting a Series X, and a lot of the games I've gotten are specifically to run on Series X, stuff like Panzer Dragoon Orta, which runs on there, and is pretty fun. I don't know if you've heard of this game, but this game is super jank from what I understand, and I've always wanted to try it out, but I haven't yet. I've always heard that sort of saying that, people that collect games don't actually play the games, and forget what I just said, but I have played most of these, at least half of them, I would say. A lot of them are here because I want to eventually, and it's not that I'll never play them, it's just that I want to later when I have the time. One good thing about doing YouTube is that a lot of these games do end up getting played because I'm gonna make a video about it. Another thing that maybe goes overlooked is the humidity in your game room and the temperature. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time because I originally had these in a basement for some time and then realized that the humidity was bad for the paper of the covers and even the consoles themselves. So I ended up getting this little thing to track the humidity of the room, and I try to keep it generally on the dry side, but not too dry so that it doesn't, mess with things. 17% because it's the winter, it's a little too low. And back down here is just where I record on, which is my old LG TV. This TV is starting to show its age, but honestly, I appreciate it so much for just being a dumb TV that plays things and has ports for things that I need it to. Even though I mostly have every converter known to man to get these running on HDMI, it's just nice to have this thing. I use an HDMI splitter for most of my consoles, but most of them don't end up plugged in at all times, just so that I can quickly get things moving. Behind the TV is a bit more of a mess than I'd like it to be, and cable management is something I try to do, but that can't always be the case when you're working with 6 different consoles. I bought this TV stand on Amazon quite a few years ago, and it's actually kind of a regrettable purchase. I ended up using this old LG TV I have because it's 1080p, it's a dumb TV, and I really enjoy that. and I really appreciate having no extra junk for my consoles, especially because I record mostly in 1080p. But this TV is too heavy for my TV stand, and it's begun to warp on the bottom. You can kind of tell with the side doors here. Not really much I can do about it, but oh well. Of course, back here I have really the only reason this room works is these two big closets where I put most of the hardware I have. So if you look in here, I've got my 4 main bins that I organize everything in. Top left is the GameCube and Dreamcast. On the right is the Switch stuff, mostly miscellaneous stuff. And then the bottom is the PS2 and 4 and 3 consoles. And then my Wii and Wii U, as well as most recently Saturn stuff. All those 4 bins down there carry most of the controllers and consoles that I use, but I also have a few drawers on the other side that I use for individual console controllers and stuff. Everything that doesn't belong or has a box on its own ends up on the top. I try to keep things pretty organized, so everything is labeled and visible at all times. You can see exactly what they are, like third-party controllers, fake Game Boy games, Xbox One S, 360, PS1 Classic, Japanese GameCube games, PC stuff, a Wii U box. Everything is always accessible at all times. On the bottom, I have a big old CRT, a spare TV, and my N64. And if we move everything to the other side, you can see I've got these big plastic drawers, which are super handy for putting together controllers and stuff. I actually have a lot of controllers. Like, I made it specifically my goal to collect every color of GameCube controller and just have 4 of every controller, at least for most of the consoles that I have, assuming they have 4 ports. But yeah, this is also where all of my Switch boxes ended up, my Rock Band guitar, and a few other things. On the bottom, I've also got my spare CRT, my little TV there. These drawers have been a lifesaver for me, though. I like that they're clear and plastic, so it's easy to look through, easy to rifle through, and I actually have 2 of them stacked on top of each other, which has worked out pretty well for me. Almost everything I have, I tie with these cable ties, and that helps sort things out pretty well. I used to use elastics or these other things, but they suck, so I would honestly go out of your way, spend the money, and get these proper cable ties that don't degrade after a while. I go through all of these and I keep all of my loose handhelds on the bottom here because it's just the easiest way to sort them. I don't have a good way to display them, and I just don't want them to get all dusty either. I've also got this old blue bin that I've used forever to store my loose handheld Game Boy games, and it's gotten a little crazy over the years, but I think eventually I'll need to find a better place for them. Usually, for most systems, I try to get at least one of every model of it, so like PS2, PS2 Slim, new 3DS, 3DS, 2DS, that sort of thing, but generally speaking, I try to get at least one of everything. The only console I actually don't have that is released in the last maybe 20 years is PSP and PS Vita. But I don't really want to sell my handheld gaming history short. I usually use handhelds at least half the time when I'm playing stuff. Even to this day with the Switch, it's probably my go-to system for that very reason. When it comes to collecting handhelds, I don't really go for everything. I usually just get things here and there pretty loosely. For things like Game Boy, Game Boy Color, I've actually fallen back on a lot of like Japanese games just because it doesn't usually matter if you know the language to play the game. So I've got things like Kuro Kurorin or a few of the Kirby games from Game Boy in Japanese just to save that money. I think for handhelds, I wish I had a better way to display them, but I do really love my DS's and 3DS's and Game Boys. My cable is not long enough. Barely over here you can see my 3DS and DS collection that's built up pretty well over the years. I spent a good amount of time around 2017 to 2018 trying to get all the 3DS stuff that I was missing. Turns out everyone just mods them and downloads the games illegally, but I'm glad to still have a lot of the cool ones like Radiant Historia and stuff like that. Despite having a ton of time on the DS, I actually don't have a lot of games for it. But the 3DS, I have a lot more games for, despite not playing that as much. Even though I did get a lot of time out of it too, it was mostly just spent playing Pokemon and Fire Emblem though. Like I said, everything in the game room here is designed to allow open space in the daytime, and then when needed, I can make a mess and dig out whatever thing I need. For a long time, I just had a lot of my consoles in one big bin, and that became too much of a hassle to get things going when I wanted to record something. So it's been really useful for me as a person that's been recording a lot of original console footage to just dig out whatever system I need right away, hook it up to my recorder, and get it done. In some of my earlier videos, I would borrow B-roll from games from other people, but nowadays I try really hard to use all my original footage. Not that that's always possible, but what can you do? Another big thing is I've been moving a lot toward things like EverDrives or Saru or stuff like that for consoles that I don't have a big collection for or that I'm like super passionate about collecting for. Sega Saturn, as much as I've been enjoying it, is pretty out of my price range for collecting, so the Saru does 90% of the work. And the same with Nintendo 64. Like, I have more nostalgia for 64, but I'm not super passionate about collecting for it, so the EverDrive works perfectly fine. So over here on these two big old Billy shelves is my GameCube and Switch collection. Both are at about 150 games. I think Switch I've got almost 200. When the Switch was new, the Switch 1 specifically, I collected so much stuff for it. I was buying all sorts of stuff, and some of it maybe I shouldn't have. Like, I don't know why I have Blood Rain 1 and 2 on Switch, but I do, because, you know, I figured it was nice to have for the future. My Switch collection has a lot of anniversary collections, Mega Man Legacy collections, Castlevania collections, things that I wouldn't be able to get on a regular system that they originally released for much cheaper than it was on Switch. So on the top shelf, I have this BioShock Infinite thing that I've had for a long time. It's just like one of those display pieces, but I just use it to store soft stuff like plushies. I don't have too many things that I don't really want, but I do have a few things that I might have got on a whim that I didn't end up playing and I might end up selling. In terms of all of my collections, I'd say my Switch one is the least curated, because at the time I had just gotten out of school and I was just spending money on stuff that I wanted. I also have like 4 Switch 2 games, and I wish I had more, but those key cards really kill me, so I don't end up buying a lot of Switch 2 stuff. I've also got a ton of Amiibo just sitting around along the shelves here. They were just so easy to collect for a long time, and I find it easier to get little knickknacks here and there instead of big space-occupying figures. I've been tempted in the past to get something from maybe like some of my favorite JRPGs, but it's, again, just takes up so much room that I find it way easier to buy an Amiibo here or there, or take home a little figure that I find at the game store that I work at. GameCube, however, is a much different story. The GameCube is probably my favorite console. It's nostalgic for me. It's got a lot of games that I like. It's got a lot of things that I consider my favorite games. And so, for whatever reason, that was the first thing that really got me started in game collecting in the first place. Generally, back in the day, I would rent a lot of games, or I would borrow them from friends. So when I got old enough to start having my own money, I started buying a lot of GameCube stuff. This is probably in the early 2010s. That being said, some of the GameCube stuff I do have is not the highest end. I don't have your Gotcha Forces. I don't have Go-Go Hyper Grind. I don't have... I recently got Cubivore last year, I think. Was it last year? That was a big deal. But even my Cubivore isn't complete because it's just hard to get these things, especially nowadays, for a reasonable price. My GameCube collection is probably worth the most out of all of my game collections per console, but I don't really see it that way because I don't think I'm selling any of it anytime soon. Of course, there's a lot of highlights. Mega Man X Command Mission. I got like Pokemon XD. Pokemon XD is pretty expensive still, I think. This is a good one that I haven't played yet. It's Skies of Arcadia. I've been meaning to try that one out. Yeah, and of course I got the old Cubivore, which I'm happy to have, and I even got a little plastic protector for it. Of course, with GameCube, I've covered a ton of these games, so you can just go on my channel and see what I thought about them. But again, like, GameCube is not something that I'm purposely buying for the price of things. Honestly, I don't collect anything for the value of it, and I would honestly tell everybody, don't collect video games because you want money. and you think they're going to be worth something. It's just never going to work out that way. GameCube prices have actually come down a bit in the last few years since the pandemic. So yeah. So all the way down here, as far as I can get my microphone to move, is my little Sega and Valve/PC corner. I've got all of these boxed games. I've even got a sealed Episode 1, Half-Life 2 Episode 1. Not really worth anything in particular, but, you know, I like them and they make me happy to have, so I just think they're neat to have around. I also was gifted this really cool Sonic Adventure statue, which goes well with my little Dreamcast cards and a few of the Dreamcast games that I have. I don't have that many, but I intend to get more when they're easy to. Sonic Adventure 2, though. Yeah, so on the very bottom here, I've also got my Nintendo Power Collection, and this is something I've been working on for a few years now, pretty off and on, pretty casually, but I've made it my goal to collect every GameCube era Nintendo Power. So I went through a list of every Nintendo Power that had the GameCube in it, and I've just been kind of going out of my way to like get every Nintendo Power that covered the GameCube's lifespan, starting all the way back from, 2001-ish. Some of them were gifted to me by a friend of mine, and they are not related to the GameCube. I've got some really late ones, like this is Kirby Mass Attack, it looks like, right there. But yeah, I had Nintendo Power, and I've brought it up in a few videos. I had Nintendo Power when it was still a thing around that time, and I don't know, I think we must have sold all of our Nintendo Powers or just threw them away. So I've been going on my way to collect the ones that I missed, especially around the 2004 to 2006, I want to say, is when I had it the most. There's like Four Swords Adventures there. I love seeing the cover arts for these things. Oh shoot, now it's messed up. Lost my hat. So yeah, that's pretty much it really when it comes to my game room / office, but I really think that it's worked for me in the long run. A lot of the stuff that I've done in here is meant to make things more efficient and easier for me as somebody who cycles through consoles a lot for recording purposes and really just has a lot of variety. I think mostly it's those three consoles that I collect for the most. Like Switch, GameCube, PS3 is really my bread and butter, and I know the most about in terms of just what's good, what's niche, what's hidden. Switch, maybe not so much. There's too many Switch games to count, but I do have a lot of stuff for it regardless. Really, I think when it comes to collecting and stuff like that, it sounds cheesy, but just get what you want and don't really worry about it. I think that if you're buying things that you're actually intending to play, whether you mean to right away or later on, that's perfectly fine. And even if you collect for the value of it, that's up to you, man. You do you, I guess. It's not really something that I go for, despite the fact that over the years, some of these things have gone up in price. It's cool to see, obviously it's cool when something you had for cheap ends up being worth something to people, but generally speaking, it's not what I'm going for. This is my couch that I use. It's cheap and not very good. I wouldn't recommend it, but I wanted something small, and that's the thing, is space is a major factor for me. Considering that I work in here, keeping things tidy and organized is pretty important, and having a place to record gameplay footage when I need to is also nice to have. I used to just use a small TV on my desk and sit in my computer chair to do recordings for videos, but that doesn't really work in the long run. Maybe if I got back to streaming long term, I would do that again, but the way it is now with a nice TV and a nice-ish couch is probably for the best. I'd love to hear what you guys do with your game collections. I'd love to hear what you collect for, what you like going for. I know this channel isn't really dedicated to game collecting like some channels are, but I do watch a lot of gaming channels that do talk about collecting and stuff like that. Even though what I do is maybe a little different, I mostly talk about niche games and cool hidden gems and stuff like that. That's sort of become the thing we do here. The collection is here to facilitate me finding cool stuff to talk about and playing cool stuff. And I really appreciate, though, honestly, that YouTube has given me an opportunity to play games that I wouldn't have in order to talk about them and collect them for the channel. So that's been pretty cool. Really, it's all about making it work for you. That's sort of what we're going for here. Making it work in the way that you need it to. Maybe you're focused on figurines. Maybe you're focused on different consoles. Maybe you want to go for hardware and you want to display that really nicely. Some people get display cases to show off different consoles and controllers they have. I do have some that are worth showing off, like I have the main 4 colors of GameCube, and for a long time I thought that would be cool to display, but I don't, because I'd rather have that library aspect. I like having just shelves of games that I can rifle through and, maintaining them and keeping them all in good condition is what it's about. And realistically, I spend most of my time recording games on this couch or over on the desk, and I'm not really going through stuff all the time. The reason I made this video in the first place was because I wanted to reset my bins and consoles and sort everything out. Everything I have, I put into an Excel spreadsheet, which is maybe not something everybody does, but I find that when you get into the hundreds of games, you get to the point where you really need to sort that stuff out. Especially if I go to a convention or a trade show or a game store and I see something that I think is cool, I don't want to buy it if it's something I already have. But that's pretty much it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video, a small little tour of the game room as it is in 2026. I do have a little bit of a cold, I don't know if you could tell, but I didn't want to record any main video for the channel in the time while I recover, and I'm still finishing the game. Next up is Princess Crown for Saturn. It, I believe, got second place on the vote that I did a while ago, and keep an eye out for that. It's been a cool game to try. I do realize I could be a bit more thorough with each of the collections that I've gone through, so if that's something that you'd like to see in a different video, let me know. I'm kind of feeling out these more topical videos, something that I think would be good to fill the dead air between my usual uploads, because those videos take me quite a while. Maybe I'll just record videos on the couch here. This is kind of nice. Got a lot of pictures around. I got this puzzle that I did a while ago, which is the artist for a band called Dance Gavin Dance. He does all the album art for them, and I saw that at a puzzle store, so I decided to pick that up and do it and frame it. Over there is my Baby Metal, which you've probably seen. I got that at a Baby Metal concert. And then over there is a Witcher poster, which is a new edition, but I've had that poster for a long time. But that's pretty much all I've got today, so take care and thanks for watching. Oh, and if you haven't subscribed, subscribe to the channel. Peace.